MP gets a security package that covers their home address, their constituency office or surgery, and if they are an MP external from the London and home counties, they have a separate address locally to Parliament to that address as well. So that's a very good package. When I was there, it was about £4 or £5 million a year national expense to do that. If there is a threat increase, whatever that security increase is matches the threat. So it depends what the threat is and how we would then increase security. And in terms of ministers and government officials, there are some named officials.
There we are, Lindsay Hoyle. Joining me now is Philip Grindell, who's an ex-Scotland Yard detective who was brought into Parliament to protect MPs after the murder of Joe Cox. Evening, Philip.
Hi, good evening.
Do you think standards have slipped? Has awareness slipped? Has security become a little remiss again, do you think?
No, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think we have to be mindful that the security that Parliament provide, they do that for members of Parliament. So clearly everyone's discussing Anne Widdecombe and the dreadful circumstances around her death. She was not a member of Parliament, so she wouldn't have had any of those security arrangements. Some of the members of the Reform Party that are suggesting that the state doesn't look after them, again, the National Security Programme is designed to look after members of Parliament, not other members of the party that are not members of Parliament.
Yeah, I mean, we heard from Nigel Farage's team last week. They alleged, in fact, Richard Tice spoke to us and said, bizarrely, that when Nigel Farage became an MP, his security allowance or the protection that he was offered was clawed back. Could you find some sort of reason for that? Does that make sense to you? It didn't particularly make sense to me at the time, but why might that have been?
No, I don't really understand what he meant by that. So every member of Parliament gets the same package of protective security measures the minute they become a member of Parliament. If there is an escalation in the threat to them, then that can be increased. But, you know, I used to run that particular role. I used to run the national protective security picture. And, you know, I don't ever remember kind of us taking security off somebody because what happens is the parts that are put in, if you like, implemented when a risk increases will often be additional physical security measures. You don't go then and take them off when the risk reduces. You just leave them there.
Can you spell out to us what a typical MP's security would be like if they're a normal average risk case, and then if they are an MP or a minister who carries a greater risk, either based on threats to them or because of their position, because of who they are? Can you just spell out what that looks like for our listeners?
Yeah,
in
I'm not going to go into too much detail around what they get, but let me just kind of reassure you this much. Every MP gets a security package that covers their home address, their constituency office or surgery, and if they are an MP external from the London and home counties, they have a separate address locally to Parliament to that address as well. So that's a very good package. When I was there, it was about £4 or £5 million a year national expense to do that. If there is a threat increase, whatever that security increase is matches the threat. So it depends what the threat is and how we would then increase security. And in terms of ministers and government officials, there are some named officials. So Prime Minister, in old days, Northern Ireland Secretary, Chancellor, they would get armed close protection support, but not all the cabinet ministers will get that.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of former MPs, should they get something? Should there be a consideration now for some sort of protection? Do we generally accept, I suppose, Philip, that actually anyone in politics, be they present or past, is now perhaps under a level of threat not seen before? Again, you can absolutely give me your judgment on this. And because of that, former MPs, perhaps we need to look at security for them as well.
Well, I think there's two bits. One is, if you've been an MP and then you stand down or you're deselected as an MP, whatever the security arrangements in your house, you will keep. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get all the response and everything else that you would do if you were an MP. But as an example, the extra physical things in terms of the alarm systems, the extra doors, the kind of security protocols, they don't take them off you, you keep them. But what we have to understand is, there are 650 MPs every year. We've actually had 5 killed in 5 attacks, thankfully not all killed, in the last 26 years. So we need to get this into some sort of perspective, because what often is happening is that there is a mixture of discussion around what threat is. And what we have to think about is most of the MPs, and Diane Abbott was certainly one of them I looked after when I was there, are getting horrendous abuse. They're getting online threats. They're getting really nasty, really quite horrible stuff sent to them all the time. But that is not a physical threat. And what we do know is that the people who make threats, as in online or elsewhere, rarely, if ever, actually are the people that attack. So if we look at the people who have been attacked, physically attacked, and in some cases killed, they were never threatened by anybody who targeted them. So there's a real difference. And what we have to do, and what to some degree Parliament has to do, is separate the noise of abuse and threats and intimidation, which are designed to frighten, designed to intimidate, designed to cause MPs to change what they do and how they vote, and that's effective in doing that, from those that actually pose a physical threat and are looking to attack and kill. They are two very separate things, but unfortunately what happens is they get grouped together in one big conversation. Yeah. So if we actually look at the threat to MPs, the reality is from a physical perspective, and it's not particularly popular with them, but the threat's quite low, actually. So we have to deal with the abuse, we have to deal with the threats, because the reality is we're spending millions and millions of pounds putting security in for MPs, but they don't feel safe. And the truth is that's because of all the abuse and threats and everything else. The second side of it is, the reality is, there's 650 MPs. I worked there for a number of years. I didn't know hardly any of them, and nor does anyone else, frankly. And so unless you're a really high-profile MP, very few people know who you are, whether when you're in power or when you've left. And if we look at the MPs that have been attacked, what we also know is they were not attacked for anything that they said or they did. They were attacked by extremists, either Islamist extremists or extreme right-wing extremists, because they represented the state. And so, with the exception of David Amess as an example, all the MPs who have been attacked and killed were targeted by people who are local constituents to them. Why? Because they got proximity, they got to see them. And in many cases, they got to make an appointment to see their MP and then attack them. So, we need to kind of understand better the kind of science behind how are they targeted and manage that. The security protocols we had in place when I was there were not taken up by all the MPs. So some MPs chose not to have them. And then, of course, what would happen is whenever there was an incident, they'd all suddenly want them. But we've become obsessed lately around close protection. Close protection is not the panacea that everyone seems to think it is. There is huge evidence across the world that when a obsessive or fixated person or a lone actor seeks to attack you, they're not in the slightest bit bothered about the fact you've got protection. And particularly when you consider that if you employ private security, which is what MPs get, they're going to be an unarmed individual. And so, there's limitations on what they can do.
Yeah. Look, this is so interesting, Philip. Thank you. Sadly, our time is up, but thank you, because that is a really informative view and a very practical view on some of the noise at the moment. Thank you for being with us. Really appreciate it. Philip Grindell is an ex-Scotland Yard detective who was brought into Parliament to protect MPs after the murder of Joe Cox. Great to have you with us.